As Naomi stood amidst the chaos of the Lagos Health Fair, battling intense pain, she felt a surge of resolve when she encountered a sea of inquisitive faces. Her heart raced not just from her condition, but from the urgent need to confront the ignorance perpetuated by a controversial public figure. Amidst whispers and skepticism, her tireless efforts and impassioned words began to pierce through the veil of stigma surrounding sickle cell disease. Just as her strength seemed to falter, a breakthrough conversation reignited her determination, promising hope in the midst of despair. The outcome of this pivotal moment could either solidify her fight or threaten to unravel everything she has worked for. Naomi staggered down the bustling streets of Lagos, her heart pounding with each labored step. The searing pain in her chest felt like 1,000 needles piercing through her flesh, a familiar but unwelcome companion. She clutched her side, trying to ignore the stabbing agony, and glanced at her watch. There was no time to rest. Her students awaited her at the local elementary school where she taught. Arriving at school, Naomi forced a smile as she greeted her colleagues, hiding the sweat glistening on her brow. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly as she walked to her classroom, each step a battle against the creeping darkness threatening to engulf her. She could hear whispers from her co-workers and murmurs about how she was playing with fire by teaching despite her condition. Their pitying glances stung more than the pain itself. As she entered the classroom, her young students beamed with anticipation, their innocent excitement momentarily distracting her from her suffering. Naomi took a deep breath, masking her discomfort with a warm smile. She began the lesson, her voice steady despite the ache threatening to consume her. Suddenly, a sharp wave of pain made her falter, causing a brief moment of silence in the room. I turned towards her, curiosity mixed with concern. She could feel the weight of their gaze, the unspoken questions about her strength and sanity. Naomi swallowed hard, her resolve hardening like steel. She knew that every lesson she taught was not just about education but also about fighting the shadows that loomed over her. As the day wore on, the pain persisted, but Naomi's determination remained unshaken. Each smile she gave, every word she spoke, was a testament to her strength in the face of adversity. Her resolve was not only to teach but to defy the limits imposed by her condition and to confront the stigma with every ounce of her being. The morning sun cast long shadows across Naomi's classroom as she prepared for the day ahead. Her hands trembled slightly as she set up the lesson plan, a stark reminder of the invisible battle she fought daily. Despite her efforts to remain positive, the oppressive weight of societal stigma was never far behind. As the students trickled in, Naomi overheard snippets of conversation that pierced her heart. "I heard she's always sick," one child whispered to another. "Why does she even bother coming to school?" The words were soft but stung like a fresh wound. Naomi forced a smile, masking the hurt as she greeted her young pupils. The prejudice was not confined to the classroom. At the staff room, whispers followed her wherever she went. "Why doesn't she just stay home? Her condition makes her unreliable," one of her colleagues remarked to another, not realizing Naomi was within earshot. Their ignorance was a knife twisting deeper into her already aching soul. Later that afternoon, Naomi met with Mrs. Adebayo, the parent who had come to discuss her child's progress. As they spoke, Mrs. Adebayo's discomfort with Naomi's condition became evident. "Isn't it risky for you to be around our kids? I've heard that sickle cell is contagious," Mrs. Adebayo said, her voice laced with unease. Naomi's heart sank. Despite her best efforts to educate and advocate, ignorance and fear still reigned. Naomi left the meeting feeling more isolated than ever, her resolve hardening with each encounter. The stigma surrounding her condition felt like an insurmountable wall built from ignorance and fear. But as she walked home that evening, she knew that this was precisely why she needed to continue her fight. Every sneer, every misunderstanding only fueled her determination to break down these barriers. Back at her apartment, Nayomi sat at her desk, her pen poised over a blank page. She began writing fervently, channeling her frustration into a heartfelt letter that would soon become the cornerstone of her advocacy. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but Naomi's resolve to change perceptions and educate others grew stronger with each passing day. Nayomi slumped onto her couch, exhausted after a long day at work. As she opened her phone to unwind with some casual browsing, her eyes froze on a startling post that had gone viral. Dr. Emmanuel, the celebrated Nigerian doctor known for his public health expertise, had posted a controversial message that sent shockwaves through social media. His post harshly criticized families with sickle cell children, accusing them of playing with fire and suggesting they should use IVF to avoid bringing sickle cell-affected children into the world. The words were not just harsh, they were dehumanizing and filled with a chilling disdain for the families already grappling with the disease. Naomi's pulse quickened as she read the inflammatory comments. Dr. Emmanuel's post was quickly gaining traction, with countless shares and endorsements from his followers. It was as if his words had unleashed a tidal wave of ignorance and judgment, reinforcing the very stigma she fought so hard to dismantle. Her heart pounded with a mix of rage and fear. The post was more than just a personal attack, it was a rallying cry for those who perpetuated the stigma surrounding sickle cell disease. As the evening descended into a storm of social media outrage, Naomi knew she had to act swiftly. This was not just about defending her own dignity, it was about confronting a pervasive ignorance that threatened to silence the voices of those affected by sickle cell. Desperation fueled her resolve. She composed a response, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she crafted a message of compassion and truth. This was a turning point, a battle for hearts and minds that she could not afford to lose. The annual Lagos Health Fair was a sea of colorful banners and bustling booths, each promising a wealth of knowledge and solutions. Naomi stood at her table, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Her sickle cell disease was worsening, the pain throbbing in her limbs, but she refused to let it show. This was her chance to combat the stigma fueled by Dr. Emmanuel's recent comments and educate the public about sickle cell disease. She took a deep breath, adjusting her pamphlets and setting up her presentation materials with trembling hands. Every detail had to be perfect, the informative posters, the personal stories of those affected, and the interactive displays meant to engage and enlighten the attendees. Naomi had been preparing for weeks, driven by a fierce determination to make a difference despite her growing discomfort. As the fair opened, Naomi's booth was immediately swarmed by curious visitors. She greeted each person with a warm smile, her eyes betraying her fatigue. Her voice, though strained, was steady as she explained the realities of sickle cell disease, debunking myths and offering support resources. Despite her efforts, she felt the weight of her pain pressing down on her with each passing minute. A sudden wave of dizziness threatened to overwhelm her, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. She knew that every conversation, every question answered, was a step toward breaking down the barriers of ignorance. By the end of the day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Naomi felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The fair had been a success, with many leaving her booth with a newfound understanding of sickle cell disease. Her body ached, but the emotional high from the day's impact was worth every ounce of pain. Naomi's determination to act, even when facing personal challenges, had proven that significant change was possible. The fair had not only educated the public but had also ignited a spark of hope and understanding in the community. The night before the health fair, Naomi lay in her hospital bed, the sterile white walls and the rhythmic beeping of machines a stark contrast to the vibrant colors she had envisioned for the event. A sudden, excruciating pain had driven her to the emergency room, and now she was tethered to 4 drips and surrounded by medical staff who worked tirelessly to manage her severe sickle cell crisis. Each wave of pain felt like a relentless storm, battering her with its intensity. Naomi's frustration boiled over as she looked at the clock on the wall, the minutes ticking away towards the fair she had prepared for with so much care. The thought of missing the event, where she could have made a tangible impact on public understanding, gnawed at her like a relentless beast. The doctor entered the room, his face a mask of professional concern. "Naomi, we are doing everything we can, but you need to rest. The fair is important, but your health comes first," he said gently, trying to offer reassurance. Naomi clenched her fists, the helplessness of her situation overwhelming her. "I can't miss it," she rasped, her voice strained. "I've worked too hard. People need to hear what I have to say." The doctor's eyes softened, recognizing the fire in her gaze. "We'll do our best to stabilize you, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that you might not make it." Her heart sank at the thought, but deep inside, a flicker of resolve burned brightly. Naomi knew that giving up was not an option. The fair represented more than just an event, it was her chance to change lives, to dispel ignorance, and to bring hope to those who needed it most. Through the haze of pain and frustration, Naomi clung to her determination. She whispered to herself, "I will find a way." Even as the crisis gripped her, she resolved to persevere, understanding that overcoming life's challenges often demanded extraordinary resilience. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue through the hospital window as Naomi lay propped up in her bed, the pain somewhat subdued by the medication. The door creaked open, and Tand, her longtime friend and fellow advocate, entered with a hopeful smile. His presence brought a brief respite from the solitude and discomfort of her hospital room. Tand settled into the chair beside her bed, his eyes reflecting the concern and warmth of someone who truly understood her struggle. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently, placing a comforting hand on her arm. Naomi sighed, her frustration evident. "I'm trying to stay positive, but missing the fair feels like a huge setback. I've worked so hard for this." Tand nodded sympathetically, pulling out his phone to show her pictures and stories from other families affected by sickle cell disease. "I met a mother whose child has sickle cell. She's been battling stigma and misinformation for years, but she started a support group that's changed lives in her community. And there's a young man I spoke to who, despite his own struggles, is studying to become a doctor to help others." As Naomi listened, her heart swelled with a mixture of admiration and resolve. Tan's stories were a reminder of the unseen battles faced by countless individuals like her. The resilience and courage of these people inspired her deeply. Tan's voice was steady and reassuring. "Naomi, you've been a beacon of hope for so many. Even if you can't be at the fair, your voice has already made a difference. You're not alone in this fight. We are all in it together." Her eyes welled with tears, not just from the pain but from the overwhelming sense of solidarity. The support from friends and allies like Tand fortified her spirit, igniting a renewed determination within her. With a soft, determined smile, Naomi looked at Tand. "Thank you. I'll keep fighting, not just for myself but for everyone out there who needs to know they're not alone." Tan squeezed her hand, his presence a powerful reminder that she was part of a larger movement, and that her advocacy was a vital piece in the ongoing battle against ignorance and stigma. The morning of the health fair dawned bright and clear, casting a hopeful glow over the bustling grounds. Naomi, with Tan's steady support, arrived at the venue, each step a testament to her unyielding courage. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alight with determination as she took in the vibrant scenes around her, booths filled with eager health professionals, colorful displays, and the steady hum of excited chatter. Tand helped Nayomi navigate through the crowd, his arm a steady support as she fought through the residual pain. They reached her booth, a beacon of hope and information amidst the sea of medical resources. Despite her exhaustion, Nayomi meticulously arranged her materials, ensuring everything was ready for the day ahead. As the fair opened, the first wave of visitors flocked to her booth, drawn by the bright posters and the promise of understanding. Nayomi greeted each person with a warm smile, her voice faltering slightly but gaining strength with every interaction. Her heart raced as the time approached for her scheduled speech. The moment came when Nayomi took the stage, her nerves a palpable mix of anticipation and anxiety. She looked out over the sea of faces, a daunting yet exhilarating sight. The microphone felt heavy in her trembling hands, but she took a deep breath and began her presentation. Nayomi spoke with passion, her words weaving a tapestry of personal experience and factual information about sickle cell disease. She described the daily struggles, the stigma, and the crucial need for empathy and understanding. The audience listened intently, their faces reflecting the gravity of her message. In the midst of her speech, Nayomi felt a sudden wave of dizziness, a stark reminder of her condition. She wavered for a moment, but the supportive murmurs from the crowd and Tan's encouraging nod bolstered her resolve. She steadied herself and continued, her voice gaining strength as she shared stories of resilience and hope. The applause that followed was a soothing balm to her frayed nerves. As Nayomi stepped down from the stage, Tand was there to greet her with a proud smile and a firm hug. Despite her struggle to remain upright, Nayomi's spirit soared. She had faced the daunting challenge of speaking to a large audience while battling her own pain, and her bravery had shone through. As Nayomi concluded her speech, the applause that erupted was more than just noise, it was a wave of collective support and understanding. She saw tears in the eyes of some listeners and smiles of encouragement from others. The impact of her heartfelt message was clear. Walking back to her booth, Nayomi felt an overwhelming sense of relief and hope. The fair had been more than just an event, it was a turning point. Her willingness to speak from the heart had begun to break down the barriers of stigma, fostering a genuine atmosphere of empathy and compassion. The aftermath of Nayomi's powerful speech rippled through Lagos like a storm. As her words resonated and sparked a wave of empathy at the health fair, they also ignited a fierce backlash against Dr. Emmanuel's controversial comments. Social media buzzed with heated debates and sharp criticisms aimed at the esteemed doctor. Nayomi's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, articles, tweets, and comments filled with both praise for her advocacy and backlash against Dr. Emmanuel. The doctor, once a revered figure, had become a lightning rod for public anger. The hashtags #StandWithNayomi and #DrEmmanuel exposed trended on Twitter, each side fiercely defending their position. News outlets reported on the growing divide. Some articles applauded Nayomi for her bravery in addressing the stigma, while others criticized her for allegedly stirring unnecessary conflict. Dr. Emmanuel, in response, issued a defensive statement, doubling down on his controversial stance and accusing Nayomi and her supporters of misinterpreting his words. At the heart of the storm, Nayomi found herself in the eye of the hurricane. The criticism was fierce, and supporters of Dr. Emmanuel accused her of inciting division rather than fostering understanding. The public debate turned increasingly bitter, with some questioning whether Nayomi's advocacy was doing more harm than good. Despite the escalating tensions, Nayomi remained resolute. She knew that driving change often came with conflict. The backlash, while painful, was a sign that her message was cutting through the noise and forcing important conversations about sickle cell disease. Her resolve was tested daily as she navigated the vitriol and stood firm in her commitment to educate and advocate. One evening, as she sat at her desk, a new wave of harsh comments appeared on her social media feed. The vitriol stung, but Nayomi reminded herself of why she started this journey. The road to change was rarely smooth, but every challenge was a stepping stone towards greater awareness and understanding. Nayomi's friends and allies rallied around her, offering support and solidarity. Tand, in particular, was a steadying presence, reminding her of the impact she had already made. As the public debate raged on, Nayomi prepared herself for the next phase of her advocacy, knowing that enduring conflict was part of the path to meaningful change. The cacophony of the bustling city of Lagos felt distant as Nayomi walked into the cozy cafe where she was meeting Amina for the first time. She had heard of Amina through a mutual contact, an advocate who had praised her resilience and dedication. Today was about forging connections, and Nayomi hoped this meeting would provide a new ally in her ongoing fight against stigma. Amina was already seated at a corner table, her warm smile cutting through the shadows of her own battles. She had a calming presence, and Nayomi felt an immediate sense of kinship as they exchanged greetings. The cafe, with its soft lighting and gentle hum, felt like a safe haven amidst the chaos of their advocacy work. As they settled into their seats, Amina began to share her story. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of deep pain. She spoke of her son, Idris, who had been diagnosed with sickle cell disease as a baby. Amina recounted the countless times she had faced societal rejection and judgment, how parents at school events had whispered about Idris's condition, how neighbors had distanced themselves, and how even well-meaning friends had offered unsolicited advice based on ignorance rather than empathy. "It's like being in a constant battle," Amina said, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and resolve. "People think they know what's best, but they don't understand the full picture. My son's pain is real, and so is the stigma we face every day." Nayomi listened intently, her own experiences echoing in Amina's words. The shared struggles forged an immediate bond between them. "I faced similar challenges," Nayomi admitted. "The stigma is pervasive and relentless. But I believe that by sharing our stories and working together, we can make a real difference." Their conversation flowed freely, each sharing strategies, frustrations, and hopes. They discussed ideas for joint advocacy campaigns, community outreach programs, and ways to engage with healthcare professionals to foster better understanding. Amina's experience with grassroots organizing and Nayomi's recent high-profile exposure at the health fair created a synergy that promised to be powerful. As they parted ways, both women felt a renewed sense of hope. Their alliance was more than just a partnership, it was a fusion of their shared pain and commitment to change. They agreed to collaborate on upcoming projects, knowing that their combined voices would be stronger and more impactful. Nayomi walked away from the cafe with a sense of purpose, invigorated by the potential of their alliance. Amina had not only provided valuable insight but had also become a steadfast ally in the battle against stigma. Together, they were ready to amplify their message and challenge the societal norms that perpetuated ignorance. The escalating controversy surrounding Dr. Emmanuel had reached a fever pitch. What began as a heated debate had transformed into a full-blown media storm. Public outcry surged as more people rallied against the doctor's inflammatory remarks. The pressure on Dr. Emmanuel mounted as prominent figures, advocacy groups, and ordinary citizens demanded a formal apology for his insensitive comments about sickle cell disease. News broadcasts and social media platforms were flooded with reactions. Hashtags like #ApologizeDearEmmanuel and #SickleCellAwareness trended globally. News outlets ran continuous coverage featuring interviews with affected families, experts on sickle cell disease, and outraged community leaders. Nayomi and Amina watched as the situation unfolded, their own advocacy efforts intertwined with the larger movement demanding accountability. Dr. Emmanuel, instead of addressing the concerns directly, issued a series of defiant statements. In his public addresses, he reiterated his controversial views, dismissing the backlash as a misinterpretation of his intentions. He argued that his stance was a call for preventive measures rather than a critique of individuals with sickle cell disease. His responses only seemed to inflame the situation further, drawing sharp criticism from all sides. The doctor's continued refusal to acknowledge the harm caused by his words added fuel to the fire. Protesters gathered outside his clinic and at public appearances, holding signs and chanting demands for an apology. The growing intensity of the protests highlighted the widespread frustration and sense of betrayal felt by those impacted by sickle cell disease.